Welcome back everybody to another episode of Motorbob Vlogs, and today we've got this rather tasty looking update to the Tiger 900 for 2024. Visually you've got some nice tweaks. It's a little more pop-in, let's say. They've tried to introduce some more vibrant colours, I think, lately. But I should say there are also some interesting updates from a, technical perspective. And so in this video, we'll take it for a quick spin and give you some of my first impressions off the top of my head before preparing the main review for the main channel. Gotta say as well, still really like the sound of this inline triple with the T-plane crank. Never gets old for me. And yeah, that is one of the key updates to this bike. So I think the previous gen Tiger 900 came in around 95 horsepower, and that was to restrict it in terms of A2 license compatibility. So the maximum you can go is 95 before it can then be restricted down to 48 so that you can ride it if you're on an A2 license. I guess manufacturers do that in order to broaden the audience for certain bikes, but I guess what it does mean is that big top-end peak power figure, which can be a big selling factor on some bikes, is always going to be limited to that 95. So they seem to have decided not to bother with that anymore. And now it comes in at more like 106.5 horsepower, I think. And that makes it sound a lot more competitive with some of the other key 900 middleweight adventure bikes like the KTM 890, the BMW F900 GS, and stuff like that. Certainly does have plenty of pep now, and you've got to be wondering as well, realistically, how many A2 license holders were spending 14-15 grand on a Tiger 900 Rally Pro and then restricting it down to 48 horsepower and then getting their full license and de-restricting it. Like, it seems like a very small number of customers would potentially be thinking of doing that. And you've also got to say there are plenty of other options in their lineup, like the Tiger 850 Sport or the Tiger Sport 660, that make for good options if you want a bike that's tall, comfortable, good over distance, but doesn't go over that figure that's going to mean you can't buy it as an A2. So yeah, I think a good improvement, certainly in terms of how it looks on paper versus the competition. As for whether anyone who's got the previous gen 900 is going to be missing out if they don't upgrade to this one, I don't think it's going to be absolutely night and day. It's top-end peak power, and so realistically you're only going to feel that extra 10 horses if you're really working the engine. And for me, the previous gen had plenty of shove anyway, so yeah, nice to have, a good improvement, but I'm not really expecting it to fully transform this bike on the road. In terms of the chassis as well, I think it is largely the same. On this Rally Pro model, you've got the spoke wheels, the 21-inch front, long travel suspension, and I think the frame and swing arm and stuff like that has stayed in the majority the same. I will say though, having jumped on this bike today after riding quite a lot of road bikes recently, you do notice straight away the tallness, and also it did feel really soft on the fork, lots of dive. But this is the most off-road biased model. Now I've whacked up the compression damping just to see if I can firm things up a bit. But realistically, if you're riding majority on the road, the GT with the 19-inch front wheel is still going to be the better option, and it's not quite as gangly and tall. Still a pleasant bike to ride. I'm a massive fan of the Tigers, and the 900s in particular I think strikes such a nice balance between substantialness, good power levels, lots of features, but not quite so big and hefty as the 1200 lineup, where things do get pretty serious in terms of stature. And while I have said, the GT's the better road bike, I can still see why this one, the Rally Pro, is going to be appealing to some people. The looks are fantastic. You do have that versatility, I suppose, of being able to go off-road or do easy trails and green lanes and stuff like that. And look, realistically, it's not terrible on the road. You're just never quite going to get the same handling from such a tall bike with the 21-incher up front. Woo! The quick shifter on this bike is very nice indeed. I think Triumph have always made pretty decent quick shifters. I don't know if there's any updates for this year. I'll have to check that before the full review, but it does feel particularly slick. And yeah, like I say, that extra bit of power probably will be beneficial to some riders if you are a fan of a quick overtake like that, especially if you're going to go touring on it. 2-up, luggage, plenty of weight on the bike, a bit more pep up top is always going to be a good thing to have. But look, while the chassis has stayed the same in many regards, and the engine is, you know, a bit more power, but it's not a completely different thing. Where I do think they've made some nice tweaks is on the bike and within the cockpit, and also I think a little bit of the comfort as well. I mean, the big one is this TFT display, which is, I believe, the same one as what you get on the Tiger 1200 now. Physically, it's a little bigger. I think it's got a different surround. Maybe you've got a different coating on the front as well there. And while you would think that manufacturers want to keep a bit of a difference between their mid-price bikes and their more premium price bikes, I don't know, maybe there's a bit of an efficiency in having this, you know, the same parts for as many bikes as possible. Because this feels like Tiger 1200 quality levels and that little bit of an extra nice user experience. And so it's nice to see it trickling down to this particular bike. Now, not only have they changed the physical dash, but also you can see the design of the clocks here is inherited again from the Tiger 1200. And also, I think I've seen this design as well on the Speed Triple models, so the RS and the RR. And I can't say it was particularly a massive disadvantage of the previous gen Tiger 900. The screen was reasonable enough, but there is something quite nice about this one. And I like the combination of quite an easy to read rev counter there, and then just the speed in the middle as a big number. I've always said this though, about this particular layout on such a nice big dash, you're only really using this middle bit. And then when you go into the menus and stuff, it sort of shifts over to the side look, and then you're starting to make full use of all the real estate on the screen. But yeah, it feels like it would be nice if you could have something. Look, a circle's never going to take up all of a rectangle, but yeah, it'd be nice to have something that maybe took advantage of just how big the dash is. In fact, I've got to pull over here and just double check that that isn't the case. Settings. Here we go, up to the display. Theme. Oh, so you've got cobalt or furnace. So cobalt is blue, furnace is orangey, fire coloured. But I think that's your lot in terms of different layouts. Now, I do think you get like nav and things like that down the side once you've hooked up the connectivity features. So there is that. I suppose that would make more of the space. But yeah, in the more basic setup, with just the fundamental riding information displayed, it really is bunched in the middle there. Minor gripe though, I think overall it's a really nice addition to this bike. What is all this on the road? Looks like salt, but it's obviously not. Maybe it's from the trees being trimmed. We'll proceed with caution. But yeah, the other thing as well is it feels like the seat is a bit more Tiger 1200-y now. It certainly looks a bit more like a Tiger 1200, and I think it's a little more comfortable as well. Just generally, everything looks a touch more designed and detailed. And there's things like the rubber pad on the back of the tank there, right at the front of the seat, which again feels like a visual cue taken from the 1200 lineup. And so everything does feel a bit more Tiger 1200-y. Like I say, you'd think they'd want to maintain that gap in terms of perceived quality and features and level of finish, but I don't know now. I'd be very tempted by this if I was thinking about the 12, especially if I found the 12 after a demo, you know, perhaps a bit on the big side. I suppose the thing that you can't replicate from the Tiger 1200 with this bike is that sheer sense of plantedness out on the motorway and when you're doing distance work. And of course, it's got the bigger windscreen, the bigger bodywork, a bit more space to it, and so it does feel, yeah, substantial and like the bike you'd want to be on if you were covering decent mileage. But there is quite a bit of extra weight to them. I think they're a little bit taller as well. And then also there's the price to consider. You know, this I think is around the 15 grand mark now, whereas the 12s are more like 20. So look, we'll go into a bit more detail on the main channel review, but definitely some food for thought with this bike. And I look forward to hearing what you think of it down in the comments below, especially if you've managed to demo one of these new 900s. Let me know what you thought of it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. We've got some nice bikes coming up, like the Svartpilen 401. We've got the Desert X soon, the rally version, which really is quite tall. I've also got the Hyper Motard 698 as well. Even the E-Clutch CB650R from Honda, which a few people have been asking me about. And so I'm looking forward to getting hold of that one and seeing what it's like to ride. Anyway, massive thanks for watching today. Do hit subscribe as well if you're new here, you just discovered this channel. Hit subscribe if you want more of the off-the-cuff thoughts on the bike. And I'll see you next time.